Hey fiction students, it's me again. Here we are. I don't know if I'm in the frame. It's an extraordinarily cold day, but I am inside, and I am continuing with my search for Bukowski in a different bookstore. And this is an extraordinary bookstore, and I think that we should also try to determine if anyone's ever been here. You have to see this. But anyway, there's a ton of great Bukowski here. To get very excited about this. This is Charles Bukowski's greatest novel, and what many people believe is his highest accomplishment in fiction, right there, Post Office. It's so fantastic. I believe that Factotum is his first novel, and it was made into a movie. Barfly. Barfly stars the other dude. This stars Matt Dillon. I think I saw it. It was really tough for me to watch as a movie, but as a book, it's fantastic. You know, I didn't like Matt Dillon as Henry Chinaski, and now that I think of it, it doesn't stand out to me. But I think Mickey Rourke plays Bukowski in a different one called something else. Why is that? I'm blanking on that. It's a screenplay that Bukowski wrote based on a lot of his fiction. Anyway, a lot of stories are in there. I'm sure that it will come to me in just a second. But there, look at all those. Oh, you know what? Oh boy, it's tough. It's tough to pick which one's better, Post Office or Ham on Rye. I don't know. That's his growing up story. They sort of go narratively in his life. Ham on Rye would be this fictionalization of his childhood. Factotum would be the fictionalization of his young adulthood during World War II, and then Post Office follows that. And he wrote a lot. And then Pulp, sadly, and I guess I'll say this, it's the weakest of his pieces. Now, I had previously, oh my gosh, there's the most beautiful woman in town. And Notes of a Dirty Old Man. That's a series of sort of like not editorials, but columns. They were columns that he wrote for an LA underground newspaper, and he brings up those columns in his fiction, giving the newspaper that he worked for different names. I think that the paper he worked for was called Open City, and you should read what he calls the fictionalized name of of that. But anyway, I just want to show everybody this incredibly remarkable bookstore. You know you're in a real bookstore when they have more books than shelves. And again, I'm going to be somewhat coy about the title here so that we can have a little conversation about where this might be. Hopefully you've been here. And you know what? I'm going to give a hint and let everybody know that this is Eugene, Oregon this time. And I have to confess, look at this. So here's the horror section, and here's the sci-fi. And since this is a fiction class, we do end up talking a little bit about the difference between literature and genre fiction. And genre fiction, you can see these different genres. We have true crime and religious fiction and military fiction and prehistorical, and of course westerns. There's all kinds of fiction, and now these genres are spreading because now we have comic book manga and role-playing games. I think those are I would say that, in my opinion, they're in too much proximity to the other types of fiction. But look, they have paranormal romance fiction. Good grief. And of course there are sections and sections and entire bookstores. Look at the number of books in this bookstore. Look at them just climbing the ends of the shelves, climbing the walls. I could literally spend all day. Look, here's Orson Scott Card, perhaps certainly one of the most famous, if not one of the best, science fiction writers. He's won a number of awards, the Hugo Awards and the Nebula Awards, and there's, of course, the famous Arthur C. Clarke, and some wonderful, wonderful science fiction here. Terry Brooks, we must be in fantasy. Yeah, there we are. So this is the fantasy section. And, oh my gosh, Robert Asprin. So this video will also be useful for my science fiction class. Robert Asprin ends up editing a fantastic collection of short stories based around a city. That's fantasy, it's not sci-fi. Anyway, yeah, it's the Sanctuary series. And also, I think it was called Thieves' World. But it's fantastic. I read that very early in high school. It was one of the first... sort of first pieces of genre fiction that I read was the Thieves' World series, because I was a kind of a dopey D&D nerd, but you know what? We come to reading in all these different ways. Here's the brilliant Piers Anthony, and all kinds of stuff. You know what? And we can talk a little bit about horror too. Okay, it's interesting that we have the Book of Cthulhu. H.P. Lovecraft, he, I believe, is the inventor of the so-called Cthulhu mythos, and then the mythology that he ends up creating is so strong that other people end up writing about that. Obviously, one of the most famous horror writer in English is Stephen King. He's actually stopped writing straight horror. He writes a lot of different things. The Dark Tower series is horrific, but I don't really class it as horror, but they're just throwing everything by Stephen King into horror now. He also was so famous he wrote under different names. There's Richard Bachman, which is a Stephen King pseudonym. One of his most famous movies that got made from this book, The Green Mile, and I'm looking for these two books. I read two of his books not long ago, and just the proximity in which I was reading them together, I saw that structurally they were exactly the same book. They literally were about sort of an outsider, talented artist in a provincial, very small community with ties to the past, and they both encountered almost exactly the same kind of conflict, and then had to literally travel through time. It was exactly the same book, and when I see if I see it, I'm not seeing. I think one of them was called Duma Key, and Duma Key was exactly like a different one. Read this one recently. That was really fantastic. This book, Under the Dome, I believe it's Stephen King just riffing on the Bush administration. If you read this, you'll see representations of Libby and Bush and Cheney. It's amazing. That's really, really fantastic. This is, I think, arguably one of his finest books. Just super excellent. Don't want to stand here and talk too much about King, but do you know what? Sometimes it's just good to read fiction just to be stupid, and we don't have to ask questions about it so much. I have to confess that this book right here, caused me to have the biggest nightmare ever. It is a very scary book. Duma Key is exactly like, during the if somebody would even just mention that you watched this and ask me in the forum about bookstores, there's a forum here, and if you mention that, I will try to remember. Duma Key is exactly like, oh shucks, I've got them on my own bookshelf. All right, well, too much. H.P. Lovecraft I read in college, and so fantastic. Just, you have to kind of slow down a little bit. It's just as easy to access, but the language slightly more dense. Anyway, but you know, horror is a genre that many people like. I guess I'm just shooting this bookstore because I am astounded at how many books there are here. Excellent classic literature in this section. Then we get back into the more literary section. Boy. So, I just learned this. I have not read Long Pig by Russell Foreman, but I have learned that Long Pig was supposedly what the cannibals called human beings that they wanted to eat. So this is probably some piece of sensationalistic fiction from the 30s or the 40s, maybe the 40s or the 50s. Take a look at that. Yeah, 1958. This would be pretty sensationalistic cannibal fiction right there. That's interesting. Wow. So, I don't know. This was just being another little tour of a bookstore for you. I think the more bookstores you can visit, the more worlds you touch. And start coming in and browsing. Just browse, see what catches your attention. For no reason. For no reason except just to grow. It's one of my favorite writers, Amy Tan. I love browsing. I could browse all day. I know that I'm vastly more interested in this than my students are right now.